Yesterday, something happened at sea that at first glance looked like a routine enforcement action, but very quickly raised much larger questions about global power, international law, and the future of economic confrontation between major states. The United States seized a Russia-linked oil tanker under its sanctions framework. Within hours, Moscow condemned the move as unlawful and warned that it could increase international tensions. What initially appeared to be about one ship became a symbol of something far bigger. This incident was not just about maritime law or sanctions compliance. It was about how power is exercised in a world where economics, law, and geopolitics increasingly overlap. To understand what really happened, we need to look beyond headlines and examine why this tanker mattered, why the response was so strong, and what the consequences could be for the rest of the world. According to official U.S. statements, authorities intercepted and seized an oil tanker operating in international waters. The vessel was described as being linked to Russian commercial networks and allegedly involved in activity that violated existing sanctions. From Washington's perspective, the case was clear. Sanctions had been imposed, evidence suggested they were being bypassed, and enforcement action was required under U.S. law. U.S. officials emphasize that sanctions are not symbolic, they are legal tools, and when violations are identified, authorities are expected to act. In this view, allowing sanctioned networks to operate freely would undermine the credibility of the entire sanctions system. From the American position, the seizure was not an act of escalation, but an application of existing rules. Russia saw the situation very differently. Moscow responded quickly and forcefully, describing the seizure as a violation of international norms and a dangerous precedent for maritime affairs. Russian officials argued that applying domestic laws to foreign-linked vessels in international waters undermines trust in global trade and shipping systems. They also stressed the importance of respecting the rights and safety of the ship's crew, calling for humane treatment and adherence to international maritime standards. For Russia, this was not a narrow legal dispute. It was interpreted as a political signal. In Moscow's view, the action suggested that pressure was intensifying rather than easing, and that economic tools were being used to advance strategic objectives. This difference in interpretation is at the heart of why the incident became so sensitive. To understand the deeper meaning of the seizure, it is important to understand how sanctions work. Sanctions are economic and legal restrictions imposed to apply pressure without direct military confrontation. They are designed to limit access to markets, finance, technology, or services in order to influence behavior. Over time, sanctions have become one of the most commonly used instruments of state power. However, sanctions only have impact if they are enforced. From the U.S. perspective, enforcement is essential. If companies, ships, or financial networks can bypass restrictions without consequences, sanctions lose effectiveness. This is why enforcement actions are often described as necessary rather than optional. At the same time, sanctions enforcement exists in a gray area of international law. While international agreements provide frameworks, enforcement remains largely decentralized. Powerful states rely on their own legal systems to act beyond their borders, especially when transactions involve their currency, financial institutions, or companies under their jurisdiction. Supporters argue this is necessary to uphold rules. Critics argue it weakens shared international systems. This tension becomes especially visible at sea. International waters are governed by a patchwork of conventions, flag state authority, and national laws. There is no single global enforcement authority. When a major power acts, legal interpretation often blends with political influence. That is why incidents like this quickly move from technical discussions into geopolitical disputes. Oil adds another layer of complexity. Oil is not just an energy source. It is economic leverage, political influence, and strategic power. Energy exports shape national budgets, alliances, and foreign policy decisions. When an oil tanker is stopped or seized, markets take notice. Shipping insurers reassess risk. Logistics companies reconsider routes. Traders factor uncertainty into prices. Even one enforcement action can create ripple effects across global energy markets. Price volatility, supply chain delays, and increased caution can follow. This is why the incident cannot be viewed as isolated. Its impact extends far beyond the immediate location. International shipping depends on predictability. Ships move efficiently when rules are stable and widely respected. When enforcement actions become more frequent or politically charged, predictability decreases. Shipping companies may avoid certain routes, raise insurance premiums, or reduce exposure to sensitive cargo. These adjustments increase costs and slow trade, eventually affecting consumers in countries far removed from the original dispute. There is also a human dimension that is often overlooked. The crew aboard the seized tanker included workers from multiple countries. They were not policymakers or strategists, yet they became part of a geopolitical confrontation. In many economic disputes, the immediate consequences are felt by ordinary people who have little control over political decisions. Recognizing this human impact is essential when assessing enforcement actions. Analysts generally view the incident through two main lenses. One is the law enforcement interpretation. Under this view, the United States applied existing regulations. Sanctions violations were identified, and authorities acted accordingly. No additional political message was intended. The second interpretation is strategic signaling. From this perspective, enforcement actions also communicate resolve. They signal deterrence and demonstrate willingness to apply pressure. For Russia, the seizure may be seen less as neutral enforcement and more as a warning. When both interpretations exist simultaneously, tensions become harder to manage. Context matters. This incident did not occur in isolation. Relations between the United States and Russia are already strained due to ongoing conflicts, energy disputes, and long-standing security disagreements. Each confrontation adds another layer of mistrust. Over time, this accumulation reduces diplomatic flexibility and makes compromise more difficult. Media narratives further complicate understanding. Different audiences hear different stories. In the United States, coverage emphasizes legality and sanctions enforcement. In Russia, the focus is on sovereignty and political pressure. The reality lies somewhere in between: international law, national policy, and global power dynamics overlap, creating a complex picture that resists simple explanations. Jurisdiction at sea remains one of the most debated issues. International law is built on agreements and mutual recognition, but enforcement depends on national governments. When domestic laws are applied beyond borders, legal debates intensify. Questions about authority, fairness, and legitimacy emerge, often without clear resolution. Energy security plays a central role in these disputes. For the United States and its partners, restricting energy revenue is a way to limit strategic capabilities they oppose. For Russia, energy exports are critical to economic stability and international influence. When enforcement actions target energy flows, they send messages to exporters, importers, insurers, and governments worldwide. The economic effects of geopolitical tension rarely stay confined to diplomacy. Financial markets react to uncertainty. Energy prices fluctuate. Investor confidence can weaken. Businesses that rely on stable supply chains face higher costs and delays. Consumers may ultimately see higher prices or reduced availability of goods. This is why decisions made at the level of state power affect everyday life far beyond the immediate dispute. Not all responses happen publicly. While official statements may sound confrontational, much of the real work takes place behind closed doors. Diplomatic channels, legal consultations, and quiet negotiations often aim to prevent escalation even as public rhetoric remains firm. Whether this incident becomes a prolonged dispute or fades from attention may depend more on these private efforts than on public declarations. Every enforcement action also sets a precedent. If one state expands its interpretation of jurisdiction, others may follow. Over time, this could lead to a more fragmented global system, where national authority takes precedence over shared frameworks. Some argue this strengthens rule enforcement, others warn it undermines confidence. In international governance, the challenge lies in finding balance. Modern technology has changed enforcement dynamics. Satellite tracking, digital records, and real-time monitoring make shipping more transparent than ever. This increases compliance but also increases scrutiny. Every action is documented, analyzed, and debated. As technology advances, disputes over transparency and authority are likely to become more frequent. History shows that competition between major powers often plays out through economic pressure rather than direct conflict. Trade restrictions, resource control, and legal measures have long been tools of influence. What has changed is the speed and visibility of these actions. Today, even a single tanker can become a global symbol within hours. Actions also communicate intentions. For the United States, enforcement reinforces deterrence and signals that rules are meant to be followed. For Russia, public opposition signals resistance and reassures domestic audiences that pressure will not go unanswered. This exchange is about shaping future behavior as much as addressing a single incident. Other countries are watching closely. Allies may see the action as a reaffirmation of policy consistency. States that maintain relationships with both sides may quietly reassess risks. In global politics, silence often reflects careful calculation rather than indifference. Ultimately, this was never just about one tanker. It was about the tension between national authority and international systems, between enforcement and escalation, and between law and power. For the United States, it represents the principle that sanctions must be enforced. For Russia, it raises concerns about sovereignty and fairness. For the rest of the world, it is a reminder that global power struggles shape trade, energy, and economic stability everywhere. The outcome of this moment will not be decided by a single action or statement. It will be shaped by diplomacy, legal interpretation, market responses, and future policy choices. In a world of rising competition, even a single ship can represent much larger forces at work. How these moments are managed will influence not only international relations, but also the everyday realities of global markets. What happened at sea was not just an enforcement action. It was a reflection of a system under strain, where economics, law, and power are increasingly intertwined. How do you see this situation? Was it simply a legal action, or does it signal a deeper geopolitical shift? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. If you found this analysis useful, consider subscribing for more neutral, fact-based breakdowns of global events.